Again, I call on the Premier to denounce Faith Goldy, to denounce what she stands for, to renounce her campaign, and to apologize to those people who are hurt and deeply concerned. Thank you.
Premier.
Ontario Premier Doug Ford is whipping up a political firestorm in Canada's biggest city.
He was poking the bear. He does not know what Toronto is.
It is a really big move for the government of Ontario to do this. It's never done it before in the entire history of the Charter.
He's the judge. I'm the Premier. He gets to use his tools. I'll use every single tool to stand up for the people of Ontario.
Faith Goldy being escorted off the stage at today's first Toronto mayoral debate.
That's simply disrespectful to the citizens of Toronto and local democracy, and Doug Ford needs to listen to us.
It started with Doug Ford winning the Progressive Conservative nomination, and then a landslide majority in Ontario Parliament. But since then, he's passed through a number of policies without hesitation. Probably one of the worst things to come out of Ford's administration for Toronto is a white supremacist named Faith Goldy. Not only would Ford refuse to officially denounce her in Parliament, but he also made a policy that actually seemed to help her municipal campaign. That policy was Bill 5, and it aimed to cut the size of Toronto City Council from a proposed 47 wards to just 25. What's more important is that he brought this about in the middle of the 2018 election cycle. Let's take a closer look at just how it all started.
On July 30th, Doug Ford brought this law forward, at which point it went through its usual process in the House of Parliament. It was debated, amended, voted upon, and reached what's called royal assent on August 14th. Normally, that would have been the end of it. But then entered Superior Court Justice Edward Belobaba. The Superior Court presides over government cases, and Judge Belobaba ruled that the province clearly crossed a line by introducing the bill. He declared it unconstitutional because it interfered with the municipal candidate's freedom of expression. And so, he prevented the province from passing the bill on September 10th, on the grounds that it violated Canada's constitution. So at this point, Ford needed a bargaining chip to use against Belobaba, and he found one in Section 33 of the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, also known as the Notwithstanding Clause. The clause stated that the act or a provision thereof shall operate, well, notwithstanding, and it's meant to put the power into the hands of the Parliament. The clause has never before been used in Ontario, giving Ford an easy but controversial power to wield. And he could have used it to bypass the Superior Court's ruling for 5 years. That's when a new player stepped into the game, the Ontario Court of Appeals. They're the highest court in the province, and have the power to review cases like this one and put a stay on the lower court's ruling pending a formal appeal. And that's what they did before Ford even had the chance to use his threatened controversial clause and potentially change the province's political landscape forever.
So does that mean that Ford won? Well, kind of. The Toronto 2018 municipal election did use the 25 wards he wanted, but that didn't come without significant opposition and detriment to the Ford government's image in the process. Not to mention, there was a significant amount of city officials who weren't backing down. We met with just a few of them and some community activists at a post-election panel. They included Asma Malik, Anna Willits, and Rocco Achimpong, and they discussed the implications of the council cuts.
Since 2014, it has been on the table that the amount of council seats relative to the growth that's happening in Toronto has to change. And there was a consultation and a process. You can even go on the website now, drawthelines.ca, and it was a process that engaged experts, that engaged community members, individual citizens, representatives themselves, and it proposed options. And one of those options was 25 wards that align with federal and provincial boundaries, and people in every corner of Toronto rejected that.
The 25 ward election really was a disservice to our city democracy. None of the issues relevant to the city of Toronto were discussed properly. You may have heard on the mayoral level issues of affordable housing in one or two debates, community safety in one or two debates, but there it was a disservice to the extent that you didn't have, the opportunity to hold these candidates to account with respect to your positions on some of these core city issues.
They said that is not a way to have better representation in our communities. Actually, with the amount of growth that we're seeing, we need more. I'm challenged right now with 44 to reach my counselor, to get responses. Maybe that's the quality of their representation. It's also because there's a lot more people in this city than there were when we decided these boundaries 25 years ago.
The panelists agreed with Bello Baba that the cuts were unconstitutional and silenced the voices of a number of Torontonians. And it's not just members of council or government opposition that Ford is trying to silence. His actions even extend to university campuses.
We are here today under the umbrella of Stop Ford's Gag Order Policy because Doug Ford announced on August 30th, hey, universities and colleges, we want you to make a policy which essentially suppresses and restricts student activism. So students no longer can shut down events where people who are neo-Nazis, people who are white supremacists, people who are rape apologists or rape deniers, or people who believe that trans people aren't fully human or real. And so what we're actually seeing here is the way in which Doug Ford, knowing that he can't limit the freedom of expression, is asking private institutions to do so. And by threatening the funds, he thinks that universities and colleges are going to fold to that. And they unfortunately actively are. And so we're here today to remind universities and colleges that they only have a campus because students sign up.
The council cuts and Ford's administration are allowing for some less progressive members of government and even some white nationalists to gain power.
The story that's not being talked about very much is the rise of racism and white supremacism and fascism in this city. What Ozma and Olivia experienced in the last election in terms of vitriolic attacks, racist, sexist attacks, has not stopped. And now we have a white supremacist in third place.
Let's expand on that for a minute. The white supremacist she's talking about, it's not one of these guys, or one of them. And it's not him either, but we'll be getting back to this in a minute. Meet Faith Goldy. She's a 29-year-old Canadian media personality, and as of a month ago, second runner-up in the Toronto 2018 mayoral election. Up until a year ago, Faith was reporting for the Rebel Media, a Canadian alt-right news network led by equally infamous media personality Ezra Levant.
I was upset that she went to the Charlottesville protest despite my direction to her not to go in any capacity, but we all screw up. But then I saw the news that she had gone on a podcast from the Daily Stormer, and it was just too far. So we said goodbye.
Since her dismissal from the Rebel, Faith entered municipal politics and declared her candidacy for Toronto mayor with a bang.
Why would we debate these, sir? Guys, over 200% in past year alone, sir.
No media inside, guys.
I'm not media right now. I'm
okay, but you're causing trouble.
You're
so
a weak man, sir.
You can't come
in. You're a weak mayor. You're on your way out. Time's up, Tory. Time's up.
Thank you, ma'am.
Her campaign was no shortage of scandal, getting kicked off stage after crashing a mayoral debate she was not invited to. And some particularly questionable photo ops. Nonetheless, Goldy secured over 25,000 votes this election. So the question is, how? And why?
So a mainstreaming of that kind of rhetoric and that kind of belief system, that's the thing that we need to tackle. We've got monthly demonstrations down at City Hall by Islamophobes and the Soldiers of Odin and Proud Boys and people like this. We've got attacks on mosques. We've got, vitriolic racism emerging, and we didn't get a chance to talk about any of that. Instead, what we got was a whole bunch of wonderful new candidates, people of color, black folks, who are pushed aside.
I think part of her support came from this pushback against the fact that she was being excluded. And the best way to crush terrible ideas is not to pretend they don't exist and try to sweep it under the rug, because it can fester and grow outside of the light, right? It's to put it in the light and smack it down.
We've talked a lot about Toronto and the city council cuts, but criticism of the Ford government's first 6 months in office doesn't stop there. It sets the tone for the new direction our political landscape has gravitated towards. One where somebody like Faith Goldy gets media attention and over 25,000 votes. Or one where environmental welfare becomes second to corporate profit margins. It just seems like Ontario's levels of multiculturalism and acceptance are on the line.
So yeah, should you be angry? Should you be upset? I hope you do. There's more passion needed in our politics because we've been very docile for a while. And I've seen a great many of you, and I live right up the street, but I've seen a great many of you walking up and down Yonge Street just staring at your smartphones. Take a look around you. Your democracy is being taken.
The simplest way to drive change is joining the conversation and making sure that these issues get talked about. It's easy to say that one voice doesn't have the power to make a difference, but that's far from the truth. We have the power to start discussion, or to put focus on democracy, and to hold those in leadership accountable. So let's start now. Use the hashtag #CuttingClose on social media to weigh in on the aftermath of the Toronto election and Ford's time in office so far. And keep the conversation going. Engage in this dialogue or discourse with your friends, peers, and family. It's okay to disagree or differ in opinion, but it's not okay to let real issues go unspoken.
I would say we should be concerned, but that we have so many amazing opportunities in a city like this to channel that concern, that care, that love for each other into actually doing something about it. And that is really incredible. So for as long as we have, and in as many ways as we have, we're gonna fight for that, right? And we're gonna make sure that we defend our democracy, but most of all, that we say that views like that and people who are actually trying to legitimize them are not welcome here.